Hello there. Today I thought I'd take a look at a wine I found in a local wine shop that intrigued me. This is Bogle Vineyards Chenin Blanc 2019, and this is from the Clarksburg AVA in California. And you don't see a lot of Californian Chenin Blanc. You certainly don't see a lot of wines from the Clarksburg AVA. But Bogle are a really quite well-known, quite successful, large family-owned company. I believe they're one of the top 15 producers in California in terms of annual volume of wine produced. And they're based in Clarksburg. In fact, the Bogle family have lived in Clarksburg for six generations now. Their involvement in viticulture started in 1968 when Warren Bogle, along with his son Chris, farmers decided they'd diversify their production into grape growing, and they planted 20 acres of Chenin Blanc vines. They were obviously fairly successful because 11 years later they built a winery and started making their own wines. Today they have somewhere in the region of 1,500 hectares of estate vineyards, and those are mostly in the Sacramento Delta, so in areas around Clarksburg or in the Central Valley, but they do also take fruit from growers elsewhere in California. Clarksburg has a bit of a reputation, has something of a speciality, making wines from Chenin Blanc. The climate here has warm days, and these are moderated by cool breezes coming from San Francisco Bay. The soils here are largely alluvial. They tend to be quite heavy soils. They retain water and can actually produce quite high fertility in grapevines. So in fact, they're more suited to producing high yields than necessarily high quality fruit. And although Chenin Blanc is probably the variety most seen labelled as being from Clarksburg, actually there are 25 grape varieties grown in the region. And in fact, there's more Chardonnay planted here than there is Chenin Blanc. And I think that's quite an important underlying fact, because the high volumes that can be produced from vineyards here mean that most of the fruit grown in the Clarksburg area is actually vinified in other wineries, as it becomes a basis for broader Californian blends for varieties such as Chardonnay. And this leads Clarksburg to build its reputation on Chenin Blanc, perhaps because Chenin, with its uneven ripening, it can have fully ripe grapes and still some green, unripe grapes, even on the same bunch, means that it retains acidity quite well. So in a warm growing region such as this, you can retain balance in the wine quite nicely. And yes, the Clarksville AVA is known for its pleasant, easy drinking, honeyed, quite rich styles of wine made from Chenin Blanc. I guess in terms of where the classic California Chenin Blanc comes from, they're not getting a huge amount of competition. Now the wine is labelled on the back label as being certified as green, and that's a sustainability certification that the Bogle family have for all their estate vineyards. Almost certainly the fruit for this will have been hand-picked, simply because Chenin doesn't take particularly well to machine picking. It's quite sensitive like that. The fruit can break quite easily and be damaged. The notes I have for winemaking are minimal because the grapes are destemmed, they're crushed, they're pressed. They probably settle, that's not noted, but I'm assuming there's a fermentation of clean juice in temperature-controlled stainless steel tanks. In order to retain acidity, I would assume that malolactic conversion will be blocked, and that will ensure that the wine's fruit aromas aren't overlaid by other notes. The wine is aged in tank, not for a particularly long period, but it sees no oak whatsoever and is in fact bottled in the February following the harvest. So it ages for 5 or 6 months at most in neutral vessels, simply giving it time to harmonise before it's bottled. And evidently a touch of sweetness is retained in the wine, just to balance some of the tartar malic acid that might have been retained. The technical sheets I've seen for this vintage don't actually tell me what level of sugar sweetness there is in the wine, but for previous vintage I note that it's normally up at about 15 or 18 grams, maybe going down lower to 6 to 10, but I'm expecting that to give this an off-dry character. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? The wine has quite a rich, quite a deep yellow colour, not quite golden, but there's a certain richness to it there. I have to say, finding a 2019 vintage wine on the shelves, I suspect that that's a wine that has sat in the distribution chain for a while, and you can never quite be sure what the quality of the wine will be. The cork seems in good condition, so I hope this will be good. Swirling it as I am, the wine is labelled as having 12.5% alcohol. It's just about forming some tears. It's not a particularly heavyweight wine in the glass. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? I'm glad to say the aromas are coming across as being clean. There aren't notes of oxidation or other notes of a spoiled old wine. In fact, I think the time that the wine has spent sitting on a shelf or in a cellar somewhere has probably helped it, because there is a lovely honeyed note to the aromas that sits alongside notes of pear and sort of maybe slightly bruised apple notes. There's a warmth and a ripeness. It's quite a gentle aroma. So let's have a taste, shall we? The wine doesn't come across as particularly sweet. There's a roundness, that honeyed note, those notes of ripe pear and maybe slightly cooked apple, certainly there. There's an underlying note of tart malic acid that is sort of being toned down because of the honeyed notes that are sitting above it. It's giving a freshness that's leaving the flavours really quite clean. There's passable length. The alcohol isn't particularly standing out. The wine has mid-weight, but you're seeing that more in the fruit at the front of the mouth than further back on the back palate. The finish perhaps has a little bit more of a sort of a fresh, appley note. As I say, you don't really see a sugar sweetness. It's more a sort of a honeyed richness. The wine's quite simple. There's not a lot of development in terms of the flavours, and the wine has a passable medium length. What I'd say really is that this is quite a pleasant, inoffensive wine. I had a look at our Wine Searcher aggregated critics score for the wine. We don't actually have one for this vintage, but across all the vintages, this wine scores an 84, which may be a little harsh, but I think does actually correctly attest to its pleasant enough, easy drinking style. The fact that it's not a sharp dry wine and it has that little bit of rounded sweetness will clearly appeal to a certain group of consumers. And while the wine may have benefited from the time it's spent aging in the hands of the supply chain, I don't think it's a wine that has the crisp, steely acidity that a Chenin Blanc from the Loire might have that would give it a very long aging capacity. I think this is a wine that is at least at peak now, and I think leaving it for more than another year would probably see it starting to decline. As far as food pairings are concerned, I saw one suggestion that this would go really nicely with pork tortillas. I like that idea. I could see it working with soft cheeses very nicely. And in fact, I think that little bit of tart acidity, its weight, and there's a slight phenolic note, would actually make it quite a versatile wine to pair across quite a spectrum of foods. So there you are, that's Bogle Vineyards Clarksburg Chenin Blanc from 2019. I do hope you found the video of interest. If you have, we'd really appreciate it if you'd press the like button. If you'd like to watch more of these tastings, please do sign up and subscribe to our channel. It would be fantastic for you to do so. And there would be the added benefit of being able to set yourself an alert and to be notified every time we publish new videos. If you have any feedback or any comments you'd like to leave, please pop them in the comments box below. We'd be really interested to hear what you have to say about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. If you have friends you think might like to watch the video, do please feel free to forward it to them. We'd really appreciate your endorsement in that way. I will, of course, leave a link to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine so that you can follow that link, find out where this wine, and in fact you could go to other vintages of the same wine, are on sale and what its price is, and also you can see any information we have on the winemaking, the region, the grape variety, the producer, what the critics have said about it, other users' reviews, any awards it's won, its price history. So the whole array of information you could possibly want to know about this particular wine should be contained on that page and by moving through the tabs on that. So thank you again for joining us, and I do hope you'll manage to make some time in the very near future to come and join us for another video tasting. Bye till then.